Mike Pounds.
I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Around the nation, DYT Nation, Jeff Waldo here. Welcome to the show. We've got a good show for you guys today. We're going to talk about quite a few different things, including the Republicans who, you know, don't mind getting sick as long as it owns the libs. So that is both stupid and dangerous. Speaking of stupid and dangerous, we also have Ron DeSantis in Florida. We're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about Jeff Sessions versus Donald Trump. Yes, the saga continues amidst everything that's going on. We're going to go into some politics and have a little bit of fun with that, especially at how sad, what a sad little man Jeff Sessions is. Then we're going to talk about big story of the day. Donald Trump might have just endorsed Medicare for all. What in the world? So I'm going to explain that and how the Democrats, if he continues on that path, are screwed in November. That's if Joe Biden becomes a nominee. So that is disastrous. Then we are also going to talk about, basically, I'm going to present some very angry ex-Bloomberg staffers. Surprise, surprise. They're kind of mad that a billionaire lied to them. Gee, can't wait. Should be a lot of fun on that one. So, all right. Before we get into it, please like and share the stream. And yes, this week, by the way, I read a couple of your comments so far in the chat. Which, by the way, super chat comments are also very, very welcome, as always. Because it's a way to help the show. Saying, oh my God, is it Friday yet? Yeah, it has been, I swear, the first week of April has felt like the entirety of, March. I mean, yes, I know, I realize half of it was in March. But this has been just the longest period of time I think I've ever experienced. Jesus. And so it doesn't look like it's going to be getting any faster. And so what's going on here for me personally, of course, I'm still, trying to do the show as normal to have some sort of semblance of normalcy around here and make sure that, you guys, I continue to do the show give you my progressive perspective on the news of the day. But it is kind of stressful. There is that lingering existential dread behind every single show when we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about coronavirus. So just, like it is funny that one of you asked something about when am I going to talk about the fact that late night hosts and a lot of other people actually have become basically YouTubers. It is kind of interesting how that happens, that everybody's had to turn to basically broadcasting from their home. And so, it is kind of strange. But nonetheless, keeping up with the news, it's pretty stressful right now. I'll be honest with you. And I'm sure a lot of you are not happy to hear it too, because it is so disastrous. But anyway, so Jeff James says, you mean again? He did it during 2016. Yeah, I know that. This time, though, I think it's much more important to bring this up because now, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, why don't I just wait and I'll get into it because we'll talk about that and again how it relates to this upcoming election and why really it's going to lead to another Donald Trump victory or very, very soon. Very, very possible, I should say. So, okay. Anyway. All right. So let's move on, and get into the first story. As the United States has overtaken the world in cases of COVID-19, Republicans and Republican pundits specifically have been focused on just one thing: continuing to own the libs. And so now I go to this New York Times piece, right? And so they talked about how conservative media has been handling this entire COVID-19 crisis, right? And so you have people like, for example, Sean Hannity, Candace Owens, Glenn Beck, but they also talked to Frank Luntz. Frank Luntz, of course, is a GOP pollster. And Luntz actually is really angry about how conservative media has covered this. In fact, in that interview, Luntz said that many conservatives were, quote, so determined to own the libs at all costs that they would play down a public health crisis, even if it cost people their lives. Now, there's something a little bit wrong with that statement. Oh, you say they do that even if it costs lives? No. They do it because it will cost lives. Modern Republicans right now are reactionary, right? And the only reaction that they're looking for is, I want to make liberals cry, right? Oh, the liberals tell us that it's not safe to go outside. See, you know what? I'm going to go outside. Oh, no, I have coronavirus now. Yeah, what did you expect? Moron of morons. Okay, but anyway, so that's exactly what they've done. Former Republican Steve Smith also tells the Times that conservative media in the Trump era reflects a culture that is, quote, fueled by grievance and a sense of constantly having to fight for survival. And that has made the embrace of ignorance one of its core values. Yeah, that is correct. Of course, let's be fair. This something that the Steve Smiths and the Frank Luntzes will not tell you is that it's not because of Trump that they've done this. No. Trump is a symptom of this. They have been doing this. They've been dumbing down the party. They've been dumbing people down for so long and embracing anti-science narratives for so long and putting out fake news and constructing an entire bubble reality around themselves that, they've been doing this for 30 years, right? And so it's no surprise that we have a Trump that comes out the other side of that. And so, but they never will admit that. They only say, and especially since Steve Schmidt's a never Trumper, he's going to be like, well, Trump's the problem. No, your entire party has been ideologically bankrupt for decades. And now you're just admitting it because, well, I don't like how openly stupid / hostile / the fact that you were exposing our entire ideology as bankrupt style that Trump has. Oh, well, I don't like that at all. That's why I'm a never Trumper. All right. So now, what have Republicans been saying? Well, I mean, look, we can go back to the beginning of February when things weren't quite as bad. We're starting to get bad when there were a lot of warnings. And actually, there had been warnings for months before that, that this could happen. But this is when things were starting to ramp up. People like Candace Owens would tweet to her followers, weeks ago, we were all going to die from World War III because Trump killed Soleimani, which was scheduled to take place before we all going to die from climate change in 12 years. But we're all going to die from coronavirus. The left is becoming a doomsday cult. That's Candace Owens, one of the thinkers on the conservative side. There ain't much thinking coming from Candace. I hate, I have to point that out. I was going to say I hate to say it, but no, I don't hate to say it at all. I actually like to say it because I like being honest. And so, no, she's totally unhinged. And that's the problem, right? They are totally unhinged. And what they want to do is that, they want to blame this on everyone else except for the administration's failure. Now, Trump, by the way, Trump recently said that, only 250,000 people dying in this country. That's what we call a victory. Now, that's not long after he said, don't worry, this whole thing, we're going to have very few deaths, and it's just going to disappear like magic, right? It's going to go away very, very soon. Well, now we lead the world in COVID-19 infections and deaths. So, and look, the frustrating thing is we've known about this. The administration has actually for months. They didn't take it seriously. Unless, of course, it had to do with their stock portfolios, in which you had, of course, Republicans like Kelly Loeffler dumping stock in retailers and then buying up stock in medical supply companies and teleconferencing companies. So that's the extent that they took that seriously. Didn't warn the American people, but they sure protected their pocketbooks. Prison. That's all I'm saying about that. So now, if that's not bad enough, they've been using, of course, to attack their political enemies as well. Yochai Benkler, a professor at Harvard Law and a co-author of a book of political manipulation called Network Propaganda, said that as the magnitude of the virus's effects grew and the coverage on the right shifted, Trump's loyalists benefited from having told people not to believe what they were hearing. The same media, he says, that's been producing this intentional ignorance is saying what they've always been saying: we're right, they're wrong. But it also permits them to turn on a dime. So that's what's interesting, right? So when this started, it's just a hoax to take down Donald Trump. It's not that bad. Now that they've all actually started to understand how serious this is, or at least report how serious this is, now they're doing the same thing as, well, it's not our fault, it's their fault. They're the real problem. We've been right all along. Now, he says on that, quote, we can look at that and get whiplashed, but from the inside, it doesn't look like whiplash. Again, cult mentality. All right, so now here's basically what they did. First, they started blaming China. Now, before I do that, right, before I get into that, China is not an angel, right? No. So what they did some very, bad things, right? To get very, very simple, they did some bad things. Okay, but anyway, they put in place very draconian measures, right? You could say that even too draconian, right? And they did that to stop the spread, but also at the same time, they limited information. They downplayed and lied about the threat in order to make their government look better. Now, you might say, yeah, that's unfair, right? No, that's exactly the same thing our government's trying to do right now. Our government is downplaying this too. I mean, look, we just fired a Navy captain, or the government did, that was trying to protect his crew. And by the way, that crew gave him a standing ovation. You know why? Because he was trying to protect the lives of the people that served under him. Not only that, but look, the military has been ordered not to report infections on military bases. So, and that's why the Pentagon is buying 100,000 body bags. So come on, dude. So conservatives, of course, downplayed this threat, saying, "Oh no, it's the flu's worse. H1N1 was worse. We weren't locking down the economy for the swine flu. I mean, come on, let's open everything back up. We're gonna be fine." And then, of course, they backed that up by doing survivor stories. For example, on Fox News, on a March 13th episode of Fox News, that's Fox and Friends, I should say, they ran a segment featuring a 65-year-old woman who said she caught the virus, but barely had any symptoms, right? During the interview, Steve Doocy asked about the absolute panic and noted the concern about older people in particular. Well, look at that, he said. But you're over 60 and it doesn't seem to have been a big deal to you, right? I mean, what a ridiculous question. Absolutely ridiculous. And yet, here we had, by the way, situations where a lot of people have died from complications with coronavirus. There are people on ventilators right now. And you also have, and by the way, it's not just older people, it's younger people too. There's that 17-year-old kid that died. Yes, he was turned away from an urgent care for not having insurance, and he died on the way to the hospital from cardiac arrest. He had COVID-19. And so, I mean, yes, younger people die. Older people sometimes don't die. And they can point to those, see, look at that. A 100-year-old survived coronavirus and Spanish flu, so it's not really that big of a deal. No, those are outliers, okay? And yes, I do realize the majority of people who get it are going to recover. But the whole point of social distancing is to make sure that the weakest among us don't get it. People with underlying, medical conditions, especially ones that affect the lungs, don't, like people like asthmatics, right? That they don't get that they don't get exposed to that. But here, conservatives are downplaying the threat. They're ignoring the threat, and they're saying, let's open it back up. Let's get back out there, and we'll spread it around like crazy. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, they also blame the left, obviously. By the middle of March, the story of the virus on the right was one of how Mr. Trump's enemies had weaponized the, quote, flu and preyed on the insecurities of an emasculated America. Rush Limbaugh, on his show, blamed what he called wimp politics, which is liberalism. Wow. There's another person who said the virus had spread while Democrats stretched out the impeachment. Quote, we now know the cost of impeachment. How dare those Democrats impeach President Trump while this is happening? I mean, they should have, what? The Trump administration should have gotten more prepared. But again, I see this all the time. Even conservatives that I sometimes agree with, like Sagar, who's on, The Hill, Rising with Crystal Ball. Even he's like, impeachment played a role in their response, and you know that it delayed their response. No, I don't agree with that. I don't accept that framing whatsoever. I mean, it's ridiculous. But look, all of this has led to a mix of things happening, right? For example, pro-Trump preachers, conservative preachers calling for a Woodstock gathering of conservative Christians, in defiance, of course, of the stay-at-home stuff. People throwing coronavirus parties in Kentucky. And guess what? Guess what happens when you do all that stuff? When you flout those orders and you get people together? Well, people get sick, right? In fact, one pastor who called this nothing more than a political attack on Donald Trump got coronavirus and died. It's real. It's real. So it is an issue. And so, look, the thing is, I'm a progressive. I care about saving lives. I care about saving as many lives as possible, right? Even to people who apparently have zero interest in doing the same for other people. And so that's the fact that they have turned this into an us versus them political football when we have a pandemic that affects everybody, right? Doesn't matter if you're conservative. Doesn't matter if you're liberal. Doesn't matter if you're a centrist moderate. We're all capable of getting this, especially since it's so contagious. And yet they have turned this into, again, some ridiculous political fight on which they can score cheap political points by attacking the other side. No, it's ridiculous. No, what you need to do is stay home, avoid mass gatherings, and take this seriously. And again, you shouldn't, try to panic people, right? But just, you got to urge them to take the necessary precautions. Social distancing, the sooner we all do this social distancing and take it seriously, the sooner we come out the other side and can actually get back to work and actually get back to being normal, living a normal life. But until we do that, and until we slow the spread by actually flattening that curve, we're going to continue to see more and more people get infected, and a good subsection, a number of those people will end up dying from this. And so I don't want to see that happen. But they are very, very apparently insistent on making sure that it does. Okay. Moving on. Yeah, I know. I'm too lib. I actually care about people. How dare me? All right. Now, unemployment continues to soar after COVID-19 basically froze the economy. And so, look, you've got 10 million people who have just filed for unemployment benefits in the month of March. So that's disastrous. You have millions more people who are going to lose their jobs, losing their health insurance, etc. And in Florida specifically, I mean, lots of people, hundreds of thousands of people have lost their jobs. And so the lawmakers in Florida, people like Ron DeSantis and former governor and now Senator Rick Scott, are now getting some buyer's remorse on what they did to the unemployment system. So let me go to Politico here, who wrote about this. Republicans are now dealing with the thousands of unemployed workers unable to navigate the Florida system to apply for help. The blowback is directed straight at Trump's top allies in the state, Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Rick Scott. Privately, the Republicans admit that the $77.9 million unemployment system that is now failing Florida workers is doing exactly what Scott designed it to do: fail. Or, as Politico notes, lower the state's reported number of jobless claims after the Great Recession. One Ron DeSantis advisor said this about it, quote, "It's a shit sandwich. And it was designed that way by Scott." So understand, they're like, yeah, we knew it was garbage. It was designed to be garbage. And now that we need it, oops. Now, we knew it was garbage before, but we might want to fix the garbage. Oh, great. Oh, now you want to fix it. Sure. Now that people need it. Great. Now, that advisor says, quote, "It wasn't about saving money," and this is the admission here. "It was about making it harder for people to get benefits or keep benefits so that the unemployment numbers were low to give the governor something to brag about." Evil. Effing evil. I mean, really? Yeah, we're going to make it so hard for people to sign up and to keep it. Also, we can lower those unemployment numbers. I mean, can't cite the unemployment rate if people can't sign up for unemployment. Republicans, man. Jesus. I mean, hey, look, who knew that destroying government agencies would lead to big problems down the road, especially if you have a crisis. No one could have seen that one coming. Except that everybody would have seen that coming. In fact, we probably talked about that before. But I mean, just the fact that these Republicans are coming out and saying, yeah, this is wow, we really messed up on this one. We're having a little bit of buyer's remorse on this. I mean, that's amazing. In fact, the Republican Party of Florida Chairman Joe Gruters said this, quote, $77 million? Someone should go to jail over that. Look, that's how serious this is, right? So now the reason, of course, they're freaking out is because nobody can access the system. There are hundreds of thousands of Floridians that are out of work, and that system is so stressed and overwhelmed that people cannot even apply for benefits. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that, well, at a time like this, you need those unemployment benefits in order to stabilize the economy, right? The local economy. I mean, if you don't have money, you can't pay your bills, can't pay your mortgage or your rent. You can't buy food. You can't buy essential supplies. That's the kind of stuff that keeps the economy in a crisis situation going as much as it is, right? As much as it is going right now. They need that money now. And so now, of course, you can go and mention, well, unemployed people have always needed that money. Yes, it's a crisis now, but if you're an unemployed person that had dealt with the system beforehand, well, then it was still a crisis then to you. And so, I have to point that out too. But the point is, the Republicans designed a system that made it pretty damn near impossible to get the benefits. And they did so, unsurprisingly, in order to help their donors. Now, this is one of the most maddening pieces of this. They said that the online system was part of a series of changes designed to limit benefits. The ultimate goal, which it delivered on, was to lower unemployment taxes paid by Florida businesses. A 2011 analysis done by the Florida legislature estimated that the changes pushed by Rick Scott would save businesses more than $2.3 billion between 2011 and 2020. Huh. I mean, look, changing the unemployment system to cut taxes for his donors? Of course. That's Republican 101. Let's screw up the system, help our donors, because nothing bad could ever, oops, looks like we just had a global pandemic. Now it's time to panic. As people try to get help, the system now crashes and denies them access. Nearly 400,000 people have managed to file claims in the last 2.5 weeks. It is not known how many have tried and failed. Most of those, by the way, and this is kind of the final insult of the system, most of those who submit applications will not qualify under Florida rules. And if you do qualify, the benefits that are paid out are some of the worst in the entire country. You know how much you get? $275 a week. Now, do the math on that, right? So it's about $1,100 a month, $13,000 a year, $13,200 specifically. But to put it in our figures, right? You come out to about $6.87 an hour. The federal minimum wage is $7.25. Unemployment benefits in this time of crisis are less in Florida than the federal minimum wage. Now, the reason that I point that out, the reason that's important is because people couldn't survive on the federal minimum wage. They can't. They can't survive on minimum wage at all. And so you have unemployment benefits that are even less than the federal minimum wage. How are people going to even attempt to survive on that, if they can even get it in the first place? I mean, it is such a ridiculous system. You cannot live off of that. And by the way, if you're thinking, well, that $400 check, right? Stephen Mnuchin says, well, you can live off that for 10 weeks, $1,200. No, you can't. That one-time $1,200 check is nothing, is absolutely nothing. So it's going to get really, really bad for people. But that seems to be the least of the Republican worries in the state. Now, One Ron DeSantis advisor told Politico, quote, "This is horrible for people. I don't want to minimize that, but," and of course there's always a but, right? "If we have to look past the crisis, it's bad for the president and it's bad for the governor. I care more about my political career than regular people's troubles with the system that we intentionally effed up to help our corporate donors." Yeah. Now, there's more from this advisor. He said, quote, "Everyone we talk to in that office, when we ask him what happened, tells us the system was designed to fail. That's not a problem when unemployment is 2.8%. Well, it's a problem for those who are unemployed. But it's a problem now, and no system we have can handle 25,000 people a day. Well, maybe y'all should have thought about that before you went and broke the goddamn system." I mean, that thinking that, oh, nothing ever is going to happen. We're never going to have an economic downturn. When, by the way, the last economic downturn we had, the recession, was literally in 2008, 2009. And so, I mean, come on. Really? Really, guys? No, this entire thing just pulls the mask off of Republican ideology. Proves how it doesn't work, right? Austerity doesn't work. The dismantling of government, which is what old Republicans are trying to do, right? Let's cut regulations. Let's cut the size of government. We can't have big government. We're going to shut it down. We're going to give it all to private corporations, right? Because corporations, in a crisis, corporations, they're going to do all the charity, right? So we're going to have charity. We're going to have corporations. We're going to have the markets step in. Oh, really? Where's the markets? Where are the markets? Are the markets helping us right now? No, the markets are literally getting corporate welfare in the tune of trillions of dollars. Markets aren't helping us. The only one that's actually there is government. And of course, if it's been broken, then it's not going to work correctly, and people are not going to get the help they need. And I'm afraid, of course, that's going to reinforce their stereotype of, well, government doesn't work, so we just have to get rid of government. No, government does work when you properly fund it, when you properly set it up not to fail. But this has been set up to fail. And now, shockingly, it has failed. I know. Look, in a crisis, you have to have responsible fact-based government, right? It's literally your best tool for mitigation, whether it be from economic harm or physical harm from health, right? From health hazards like, a virus, perhaps. And look, it's the best tool for saving lives and delivering resources to the most vulnerable. You do not see the free market stepping in because the free market, again, is one of the ones who are also getting bailed out. And so you can see that their entire ideology, their faulty ideology of, so-called modern conservatism, which is basically corporatism at this point, is exposed for all to see. All right. A lot of great comments from you guys. Let's move on. Itchy nose. Always from these glasses, man. Always. We now have some new updates in the pain relationship between Jeff Sessions and President Donald Trump. So now it's a fun little article in the New York Times where it points out that Donald Trump's presidential campaign is now warning Jeff Sessions, hey, we're not your friend. Please stop mentioning us. So now, specifically, the campaign is demanding that Sessions stop attaching himself to the president in his effort to win his old Senate seat back in Alabama. So now, this is after Sessions distributed a campaign mailer that mentioned the president a total of 22 times. 22 times. Oh, how sad and pathetic is that? Like, I'm going to send out a mailer, Trump, 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 Trump. Elect me, Jeff Sessions. Ridiculous. I mean, it's so bad that the Trump campaign, you're going to love the response from the Trump campaign. They said in a letter, the Trump campaign has learned that your U.S. Senate campaign is circulating mailers like the one I have enclosed, in which you misleadingly promote your connections to and support of President Trump. That's from Michael Glassner, right? Mr. Trump has endorsed Tommy Tuberville, a former football coach over Mr. Sessions in the runoff, to be the Republican nominee taking on Senator Doug Jones. Mr. Sessions, who was the first attorney general in the Trump administration, has repeatedly invoked Mr. Trump through the campaign, even after Mr. Trump endorsed Mr. Tuberville. That's from the New York Times article. The letter continues by saying the enclosed letter in donor form, in fact, mentioned President Trump by name 22 times. The letter even makes the delusional assertion that you are President Trump's number one supporter, number one fan. Woo! Number one. We only assume your campaign is doing this to confuse President Trump's loyal supporters in Alabama into believing the president supports their candidacy in the upcoming primary runoff election. Nothing could be further from the truth. This letter goes on to make clear that Trump and his campaign unambiguously endorsed Tommy Tuberville, which again is a really fun name to say. Tuberville. Tommy Tuberville. Sounds like somebody who's going to be in Thomas the Tank Engine or whatever. Thomas and Friends. It's Tommy Tuberville. Okay, anyway. So, I know, says a guy with the last name Waldorf. But okay, anyway. Continuing. It concludes that that President Trump and his campaign do not support your efforts to return to the U.S. Senate. So, ouch. That's what this letter is. Ouch. Delusional. Oh, you're delusional. Stop using Trump's name. We do not support you. We support your opponent. Get off our nuts. That's basically what that is, right? Why are you so obsessed with us? That's another thing. Why are you so obsessed with Trump? Stop it. Just go away, Jeff Sessions. Go away. That's gotta hurt, man. So now, what's interesting is imagine being so loyal to the president, right? And I know that's insane, but just imagine, right? Put your career on the line to be the first senator to endorse Donald Trump. Back when everybody thought he was a joke. No, he is a joke. But instead of being a funny joke, Donald Trump has turned into a sick, cruel joke. But anyway, being that first enthusiastic supporter and then being treated like this. Why? Because you were not loyal. And that goes back to, of course, Jeff Sessions recusing himself during the Russia investigation. In fact, according to a half dozen current and former advisors, Trump viewed Mr. Sessions' recusal as an act of disloyalty and a political form of original sin, from which he has obviously never recovered and never will, because Donald Trump is king of petty. He is a mob boss. Everything is about loyalty. We all know that. And not going down for Trump, well, is disloyalty. And what's interesting is that Donald Trump has attacked Jeff Sessions constantly, right? Consistently, constantly. Jeff Sessions, he's so terrible, right? On Twitter, on social media, and also at campaign rallies. Jeff Sessions is like, oh, no, please don't do that. Please, I love you, Mr. Trump. Please take me back. He's never said anything negative against Donald Trump. And it's like, but Mr. Trump, I am your number one fan. Please take me back. I love you. I want to really win my re-election. I mean, it's so pathetically sad. But that's what, I mean, is he doing it for a political reason? Maybe, right? Maybe there's the people that don't pay attention to the Twitter or social media and all that stuff and think, oh, well, he says he's a fan of Donald Trump, then I guess I'll vote for him. So that is one thing, but it also could be, of course, he's just, I mean, Donald Trump has gotten so many people to bend down and kiss his ass or his ring, whatever you want to say, right? I say ass because it's very clear. He gets people to be slavishly loyal to him. So much so that it's crazy. And look, maybe Sessions, and you could say, well, he wasn't loyal enough to, recuse himself from Russia. Well, look, I think there's a point, right? And Jeff Sessions maybe wasn't able to cross that point to say, look, yeah, I won't go to, I will support you, but I'm not going to go to jail for you. And I think that's the point of where Donald Trump is like, no, you will go to jail for me. That's what I think loyalty is. You can go to prison to me. You can suffer all the consequences to defend me because that's what I expect from you. I don't know. But there's that, right? But it's still super, super sad to see. And it's such a pathetic way. I almost pity the guy. Because, yeah, as somebody points out in the chat, it's like a Stockholm syndrome. It really is. So, look, to that I say, sorry, Jeff, but he's never going to love you. He's never going to love you. He's never going to take you back. And so from one Jeff to another, give it up, pack up, go home. All right. I'm going to take a very quick break here. We'll come back. We got more stories, so don't worry, including Donald Trump goes left on healthcare. Yikes. So we'll talk about that right after this break.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation with you, me, and all of us, I guess. Welcome back to the show. All right. So, look, why don't we dive into the story because it's kind of a big story. So let's just get into it. But thank you to all the patrons and subscribers and channel members. So we got a couple of channel members. Thank you, Dan Powell and Jasper DeSone for signing up. You guys are amazing. All right. Let's just go into it. President Donald Trump is about to outflank Democrats on healthcare. So now, look, obviously he's not serious about this as far as we know, but he is calling for an expansion of Medicare or Medicaid. So now, all right, let me give you the details here. So during a Wednesday press conference, President Trump said he would consider opening up the programs of Medicare and Medicaid to nearly 30 million uninsured Americans, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So now this came from a question from Fox News correspondent John Roberts. Now, Roberts asked President Mike Pence a series of questions about the administration's decision not to reopen the ACA marketplace. Now, I've said before, that's not going to be all that helpful. People who lost their jobs and their employer-sponsored insurance, they don't have income now. So they're not going to be able to afford those private plans off the exchange. So, of course, you would need to have a program like opening up Medicare for people who are uninsured due to those job losses. But the question is a good question. And so let me read that. Quote, there will be people who don't have insurance who get sick before any of these mitigation efforts are put into place. And without opening the healthcare exchanges, where can they find insurance? People who aren't insured by these companies that are covering the cost of the copays, where can people go now to get health insurance if they get before they get sick? So that's a question from Fox News. And it's a good question. Hey, we've got these, people that are uninsured. Now we've got 10 million people that, don't have jobs. They filed unemployment claims. Statistically, at least half of them had their insurance through work. Well, now that they don't have work and they don't have their insurance, what are you going to do for them? Because again, if you say, well, they just got Cobra. No, what Cobra is it basically allows you to pay out of pocket for the health insurance that your company that you would normally get through work, right? But with no employer contribution, which means you are now paying for 100% of the cost of that insurance. And it is incredibly unaffordable. And so that's the problem. That's why people can't get Cobra, right? And why it's ridiculous. So now that press conference, I had Mike Pence, right? So he was asking Mike Pence that question. Pence dodged that question artfully, right? So now he talked about how, we've got the states that expanded Medicaid, and we've got the health insurance companies that made some, quote, inspiring decisions to waive copays on testing and treatment. By the way, there are no insurance companies that have waived copays on treatment, just testing, right? But he said this, quote, we were very inspired as well because the president's engagement with the leading health insurance companies in the country that now, so far, two of the top health insurance companies in America have announced that they are not only willing to waive copays on testing, and now testing is fully covered because of the bill the president signed for every American. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. Wow, two health insurance companies waiving copays on testing. Well, what happens when you test positive? Do you have an answer for that? You have no, you don't have an answer for that. So now, interestingly enough, Donald Trump steps in and he says to Roberts, that's actually a fair question. That's a fair question. And he even told Mike Pence that he was masterful for dodging it. Quote, John, I think it's a very fair question, though. And it's something we're really going to have to look at because it doesn't seem fair. If you have it, meaning, of course, insurance, you have a big advantage, and at a certain income level, you do. I think it's one of the greatest answers I've ever heard because Mike was able to speak for about 5 minutes and not even touch your question. I said that's what you call a great professional. So he is complimenting Mike Pence for dodging the questions so good that he could speak for 5 seconds and not say anything at all. The mark of a great professional. Hey, man, that's
Mike Pounds
for you. Okay. Anyway, it's a strange flex, right? You can talk for 5 minutes and not say a damn thing. Well done, sir. Well done. But okay. Anyway, he says, quote, I think we're going to get to it. I don't think the other group will get to it. They haven't even spoken about it. And that's, of course, about expanding Medicare or Medicaid to cover these people who are uninsured. Trump did say, I'm not committing to anything. Quote, I can't commit. I have to get approval from it. I have a thing called Congress. but it's something we're going to look at, and we have been looking at it. I wonder if any of this has to do with, by the way, Donald Trump's newest approval ratings, which show, I believe, 53% of Americans now disapprove of the job President Trump is doing on coronavirus. Whereas only 47% approve of his handling of the situation. So that poll comes out earlier. And you know, he says, well, I think we should do something about Medicare and Medicaid and open it up for the people. Yeah, that's what we should do. And so what's interesting about this is a position that rhetorically the Democratic frontrunner, Joe Biden, is not willing to take. In fact, he tripled down against Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic. So that's really stupid politically. Trump, though, says, well, we have this thing called Congress, but it's something that we're looking at. We're going to look at doing Medicare. We're going to look at expanding Medicaid, and we're going to see what we can do. And, by the way, again, he takes a dig at Democrats, say, well, Democrats aren't going to do that. Well, I mean, it depends. Rashida Tlaib, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Pramila Jayapal, all of the progressives have been calling for Medicare for all, right? But you point at Democratic leadership, Pelosi, Schumer, Joe Biden, well, they're not fighting for Medicare for all. No, they're fighting against Medicare for all. So that, unfortunately, is what I was afraid of. Opens up a lane for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has no ideology, right? His ideology is whatever helps Donald Trump. Okay. So I'm going to say whatever I want. I'm going to take whatever position that I want. I'm going to take ideas from the left. And remember, he did this back in 2016 when it came to trade, right? He took ideas from the left, from Bernie Sanders, against being, against the TPP, and says, well, I'm against the TPP. I want fair trade. I want better trade, right? And so, well, that was an effective rhetorical shift, right? And policy shift that got a lot of people hurt by NAFTA, hurt by, these international trade agreements to go and vote for him. That was very effective in the Midwest. And so now, in the middle of a pandemic, where now millions of people are losing their healthcare, Donald Trump sees an opportunity. And he says, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go left because I have no principle. I'm not a conservative. I'm not technically a Republican. No, I'm a Trump publican, right? I do things that help me. And if expanding Medicare or Medicaid helps me politically, well, then of course, let's go. Well, let's do it. I mean, let's do it in a way where I get the credit for coming up with the idea, but Congress, when they decide not to pass it, because Congress is owned by health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, well, the American people will just blame them, and specifically the Democrats, and I sail to re-election. I mean, that's what I'm afraid is going to happen, right? And so that's the thing. Look, we know it's a lie. We know it's, him just posturing politically, but if he is able to outflank the left on messaging alone, well, that's dangerous, right? Either Democrats, and we've been warning this, either Democrats grab this Medicare for all and run with it, right? That, first we nominate a front runner like Bernie Sanders, who actually has that idea, has been fighting for that idea, or at the very least, we get one of the candidates who would, who could win the nomination. And I'm not saying Bernie can't, but it's a very difficult road at this point, but he still could win. But say Bernie Sanders does not become the nominee, that we could at least push one of the candidates, or Joe Biden, to be in favor of Medicare for all. But he hasn't done that. And so you open up this lane for Donald Trump to say, well, you're not in favor of that, but I am. Vote for me. I mean, unfortunately, we're going in that direction. And so I got to ask, how bad do Democrats suck at politics to get outflanked by Donald Trump? A serial liar, by the way, because he's not going to bring you Medicare for all. He certainly ain't going to bring you Bernie's bill, right? I mean, say he was actually serious about this. And again, I don't believe he is. But do you think that he would bring us an actual Medicare for all bill or something that leaves out undocumented immigrants, for example, right? Or immigrants in general? Think of it as Medicare for white people and I guess some black people and some Latinos, as long as you've been in the country long enough. You don't think that he would put those stipulations on something like that? I mean, it would be really popular for his base. Oh yeah, we get free government health care. We get expanded Medicare. But those undocumented immigrants and immigrants that haven't been here long enough, well, they don't get it. I mean, you think that he would do something like absolutely. Absolutely. And so it would be a pretty racist piece of legislation that I could see him put out. But if he does it, he would still get enough support to probably win re-election. And that's what I'm scared of, right? And so the other thing too, by the way, is this contradicts everything the Trump administration has been trying to do before. His administration's been trying to cut Medicare and Medicaid for years, but it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter now. And so here's what's going to happen. Mainstream media is not going to talk about that. Mainstream media is now going to say, look at Donald Trump, Medicare for all. How are you going to pay for that? The same thing they've done against Bernie Sanders. And by the way, now they're going to say, oh, look at that. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders is the same. They both think healthcare is a human right. Ugh, gross. And they're going to attack it. They're going to attack Trump. They're going to attack Medicare for all. They're going to do all of this during a pandemic, by the way. So now, if Donald Trump does go in this direction and say, yes, we are actually seriously looking at doing a single-payer healthcare system, but, you know, look, the Congress is attacking me. Media is attacking me. The Democrats are terrible. The Democrats don't want you to have universal healthcare, whereas I want you to have universal healthcare. That's what I've been trying to do all along. And he can even go back. After disavowing a single-payer system, he can go back to those videos back in 2015 where he's like, yeah, we could do a healthcare system like a Medicare for all. That's a good idea. And you can even go back to quotes from his book, right? Where he said, well, yes, I believe we should have a system like that. We should have a system like Canada's and, Australia's and the UK's because it's so much better than the system we have here. Because he actually did say that. And he has no ideological core, no actual core beliefs. And he can successfully, I believe, convince people on the right that this is a good decision, that this is a good thing. And so he can do that. And I think that could help him win re-election. I mean, all of that stuff. So look, maybe I'm wrong, but Democrats, unfortunately, they've opened this door, right? Because they've refused to expand healthcare, right? Joe Biden's running on a public option plan, which leaves 10 million people out. And Donald Trump has successfully, gone to the left because Democrats have ceded the conversation on healthcare to a horrible person like Trump. And so, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if he's just going to turn around tomorrow and say, well, never mind. But he, because we don't know, but he could. And so that's what I'm afraid of, is that this is going to help him politically. And as long as it is, that he'll be able to lie about it successfully enough to get reelected. And we cannot afford that to happen. Okay. Ravaging Wolverine makes a great point in the chat by saying that Trump is good at convincing people because he tells them what they already want to hear. Yes, and now with millions of people out of work and no longer having insurance, people want to hear, don't worry, we'll have health care for you. And so that's a great, devastating point. Okay. The right wants everything that progressives want. They just want it for white Christians only. Yes. And so could I see something like that? Like a Medicare for some, expanding it to certain people with certain qualifications, specifically leaving out minorities, the people that are, that need it the most? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Anyway, so let's get the final story here. Let's go to Bloomberg. When Michael Bloomberg announced his campaign, he had one goal: to take out Bernie Sanders. Now that he believes his goal is done, as Biden is right now leading the delegate race by about 300 delegates, and is already saying the race is over, calling for Bernie Sanders to drop out, which I think is ridiculous. We have 27 states left to vote, including New York. Well, I'm just saying, Bernie Sanders still has a chance in this race. It is far from over. Nonetheless, Bloomberg says, well, now we have a strong nominee. Now we have somebody who's looking very likely to beat Bernie Sanders. Okay, so I'm going to drop out. All right, well, he ended his campaign and then fired all of his campaign workers. Well, now, here's the thing about that. So now Bloomberg's campaign has poached a lot of workers from other campaigns because of the promises of not only a job with good pay and good benefits, which only Michael Bloomberg could be able to do, right? But also that they would have that job all the way through the election, right? Because the most important thing for Michael Bloomberg is to defeat Donald Trump. So we're going to have an organization, we're going to have people, even if I'm not in the race, they're still going to be working until November. Well, it turns out, nope. His promises went up in smoke as soon as it became financially beneficial for him to go back on those promises. So now, Bloomberg's campaign, by the way, was the most expensive campaign in history. And it was all, of course, for one reason: to take down Bernie Sanders. And so it was a way to crush progressives. His employees, a lot of them didn't know that. And so they were absolutely blindsided by this entire thing. So now one of them was Matthew Jeweler. Matthew Jeweler worked as a regional organizing director and Colorado's digital director. He gave up an IT job he'd had for about 10 years in order to join Bloomberg's campaign. During the interview process, he said he confirmed repeatedly that the job would last through November. Quote, "I honestly don't know if I would have taken the job if it weren't for that specific guarantee, because I knew I wanted to work on the general election." Jeweler said he'd learned that Bloomberg had dropped out online. Many staff hadn't been told before the news broke. I had people texting me saying, "Why did I just find out that we dropped out from New York Times article or something that we heard on the radio?" Jeweler said that even though his primary campaign was ending, he still hoped that most field staffers would have jobs moving forward. Instead, that they didn't. And that's fairly obvious, right? There were 2 rounds of layoffs. In the first round, hundreds of staffers around the country were fired. They said that they would be paid through March 31st and were encouraged to apply to work for Bloomberg's organization in battleground states. But that, of course, did not pan out either, because Bloomberg abandoned his plans to form a new independent entity and then announced that he would instead just give $18 million to the DNC and walk away. So that's it. That's what happened. And now all of these people are out of work and they're pissed off. In fact, Donna Wood in Miami lost her job on March 20th during a conference call. Quote, "It was read off a script from HR and then it was like, 'Goodbye, you can hang up now.' It was a low blow. I felt very used and very kicked to the curb after all that I had given to the campaign in the short time that I did work for it." Asked how she feels about the assurances he made as a recruiter to potential staffers, Jethwani said, quote, "Mike borrowed my credibility and abused it in that moment. Anytime a candidate takes on staff, the staff executing that candidate's message utilize their own credibility to carry that message." He said that's how persuasive organizing works. Or even in the hiring process. "This candidate assured me that I have a job through November and you have a job through November. So that's why I'm assuring you that you have a job through November." Well, they didn't. What did you expect? Sorry, not sorry. Oh, you actually believe Mike Bloomberg? Look, I understand that some Mike Bloomberg's staffers didn't believe him, but just worked there for the money, right? And some of them were heroes because they campaigned for Bernie Sanders while getting paid by Mike Bloomberg. All right. See, that I'm okay with. But it seems like these others were generally clueless about who Mike Bloomberg is. He's not a good guy. He's a bad person. He doesn't give a damn about his employees. He doesn't give a damn about regular workers or regular people. He only got into this race to stop his taxes from going up. That's it. And still, of course, these people are very angry. And look, they're rightly angry, of course. I think that, look, I don't feel too bad for them. I think if you're working for Bloomberg, that's kind of stupid, right? But they did get screwed over, to be fair. Now, Donna Wood filed a breach of contract suit. The complaint in Wood's case alleges that Bloomberg deprived staff of promised income and healthcare benefits, leaving them and their families potentially uninsured in the face of global pandemic. Well, to be fair, that's still what life would have been like for millions of people under Bloomberg and will be under Joe Biden. I mean, look, Bloomberg never actually wanted to win the race. He just wanted to stop Bernie Sanders, and mission successful, right? Now, there's another class action lawsuit by former workers, but see, there's a problem here. Those are not going to work. They signed an at-will contract, meaning you can get fired at any time for any reason. So, look, man, you signed the contract. You shouldn't have listened to Bloomberg and then signed their contract. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Attorney Ari Wilkenfield, an employee law litigator who is not involved in these lawsuits, said he sees these types of cases all the time, and it will be an uphill battle. Quote, everybody wants to think that their new job is going to be great and their new boss that hired you is going to be genuine. There's this psychological impediment to saying, hey, brand new boss, you've made some promises. Can you put them in writing? Unfortunately, the new boss probably knows that. That's why they make promises in writing that they're willing to commit to, and verbally ones they're not sure or can't commit to. Or in this case, I think never wanted to commit it to. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. Not 1 cent went to guaranteeing these people would continue to have a paycheck. Did you really think that when the campaign was over, that Mike Bloomberg wasn't just going to be like, F off? You got your last paycheck on March 31st. Now piss off. I'm done with you. I don't need you anymore. I don't care about you. My taxes are protected, right? I'm not going to have to pay more in taxes for you to get health care. I mean, I didn't want to in the first place. So why the hell would I continue paying you if you're not useful to me? I mean, that's it. Cut and run, right? Now, one more thing that's a slap in the face to these workers, but again, totally expected. Multiple staffers said they were told that they kept their Bloomberg-issued iPhones and MacBooks. It's another thing, another supposed perk of the job. They would be taxed in the future on their 2020 tax returns. How they did it instead, according to Jeweler, was they added it as supplemental income on all of our paychecks, meaning it put some of us in a different tax bracket, meaning we got taxed at a higher percentage. That means some people saw withholding for as much as $700 to $800, including Jeweler. The campaign informed staff after the fact, because of course, that they can receive refunds if they return the devices. Trash. Total trash. Bloomberg is trash. And here's the thing. We knew that. I knew that. I was telling everybody, Bloomberg is garbage. Don't listen to a damn thing he says. Why? Because Bloomberg is only out for Bloomberg. He was only ever out for Bloomberg. But hey, those who fell for it, maybe you should have thought about working for a better campaign, or for a candidate that actually looked out for workers and for regular people. But you didn't. And I guess, sadly enough, you get what's coming. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Please consider supporting the show, patreon.com/TYTNation, or becoming a channel member, all that fun stuff. So that said, love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm sorry, Monday.
Please clap.
Mike Pounds.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.